All right, I'm going to go into our second story, which is Glenn Greenwald. Now, before I get into this, I do want to let everybody know Glenn Greenwald, like Chris Hedges, also has a Substack. You should definitely check it out. There's good articles on there. I found myself reading more Substack articles than Medium nowadays, but I have to get back to my writing on Substack as well. I've just been so busy. Like I have a whole list of article topics I want to write about. But Glenn Greenwald wanted to call out something with Joe Biden, his administration, the funding and how he's funding people abroad, but not willing to fund Americans here in the United States. And this message is spot on. So the name of this article is Biden wanted $33 billion more for Ukraine. Congress quickly raised it to $40 billion. Who benefits? Tens of billions, soon to be much more, are flying out of U.S. coffers to Ukraine as Americans suffer, showing who runs the U.S. government and for whose benefit. So this is something that we've been complaining about a lot over at RBN. I'm sure you guys have been complaining about this as well. This is a problem. You are basically showing the American people that you have all this money to dish out to other countries, but you do not have money to give the American people here for a better life. So let's go on to this here. From the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, the Biden White House has repeatedly announced large and seemingly random amounts of money that it intends to send for fuel to fuel the war in Ukraine. The latest such dispatch, pursuant to an initial $3.5 billion fund authorized by Congress early on, was announced on Friday. Biden says the U.S. will send $1.3 billion in additional military and economic support to Ukraine. This was preceded by a series of new lavish spending packages for the war, unveiled every 2 to 3 weeks, starting on the third day. So here we go. And he lays out the numbers here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm glad that he did this as a timeline, because I've been hearing about the numbers. I've been reading about the numbers, but he put it into a better perspective here by actually putting some dates on these amounts. February 26, Biden approves $350 million. March 16th, Biden announces $800 million. March 30th, Ukraine to receive an additional $500 million. April 12th, U.S. to announce $750 million more. May 6th, Biden announces new $150 million package for Ukraine. I'm glad he did the math for us, guys, so we don't have to add this up. Those amounts by themselves are in excess of $3 billion. By the end of April, the total U.S. expenditure on the war in Ukraine was close to $14 billion. Come out for just a second. Now, could we have done something else with that money? We could have tried to eradicate poverty here in this country. We could have given everyone universal health care. We could have offered Americans free college, at least free community college, which we're not even doing that. So many other things that we could have done with that money, but we gave it to someone else. Right now, the Biden administration cares more about people abroad in Europe. I got to be careful with the words here. In Europe, than they care about Americans in our own country. All this money just magically seems to appear like every 2 or 3 weeks. But when we need tangibles here, they tell us that it's too expensive. They can't afford it. They don't have the money. Looks like to me, the money is there. They just don't want to give it to us. Let's go back into the article. He goes on to say, drawn from the additional $13.5 billion Congress authorized in mid-March, While some of that is earmarked for economic and humanitarian assistance, most of it will go into the coffers of the weapons industry, including Raytheon, on whose board of directors the current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, sat immediately before being chosen by Biden to run the Pentagon. As CNN put it, about 6.5 billion, roughly half of the aged package, will go to, whoopsie, I jumped ahead there, will go to the U.S. Department of Defense so it can deploy troops to the region and send defense equipment to Europe. Again, I have to be careful about the words here. So let me go down to this part here. As enormous as those sums already are, they were dwarfed by the Biden administration announcement on April 28th that it is asking Congress for $33 billion in funding to respond to the invasion, more than double the $14 billion in support authorized so far. Let's go down here. This is my favorite part. It is difficult to put into context how enormous these expenditures are, particularly since the war is only 10 weeks old. And the U.S. officials predict and hope that this war will last not months, but years. That ensures that the ultimate amounts will be significantly higher still. So, guys, if this lasts for years, that means for years, they are going to continue to give them money. Meanwhile, people are starving here. Meanwhile, people can't afford to buy groceries here. I'm going to get into that in just a second. Inflation is rampant right now, but they're giving money to other people. Let's go down to this part here. This is a long article. I'm not going to read the whole article, but I do want to show you something else. This part right here, believe. This omission, a failure. I don't know why this keeps moving like that. Okay. A failure to address how the interests of ordinary Americans are served by the U.S. government's escalating role in this conflict is particularly glaring, given the steadfast and oft-stated view of former President Barack Obama that Ukraine is and always will be a vital interest to Russia, but is not of vital interest to the United States. For that reason, Obama repeatedly resisted bipartisan demands that he send arms to Ukraine, a step he was deeply reluctant to take due to his belief that the U.S. should not provoke Moscow over an interest as remote as Ukraine. While it is extremely difficult to isolate any benefit to ordinary Americans from all of this, it requires no effort to see that there is a tiny group of Americans who do benefit greatly from this massive expenditure of funds. Notice he says here, it's a tiny group of Americans. That is the industry of weapons manufacturers. So fortunate are they that the White House has met with them on several occasions to urge them to expand their capacity to produce sophisticated weapons so that the U.S. government can buy them in massive quantities. There are people who are benefiting from this. I'm so glad he said that. It's just not us. Because we're not Raytheon. We're not Lockheed Martin. We're the ones that are not benefiting, but there are Americans here who are benefiting from it. It's disgusting when you think about it. Let me go back in. There's something else that I do want to show you because there's a graph in this article, and this is what I want to show you. I'm going to have to zoom out just a little bit so you can see all of them. You guys know I love graphs and charts. I love analytics, so I'm glad when people do this. So He's showing all of the companies here, the stock prices of many of the world's biggest arms manufacturers shot up in late February after the invasion began. Let's look at these companies. You may recognize some of them, folks. All right. We have New York Stock Exchange average here. That's down here in the right bottom corner here. And you can see the timeline is going from November 2021 all the way up until May, or where we are right now in May. Now, if you look at all the companies going back to November, they were kind of around the same spot, kind of hovering over zero right here, and then going further up. But as we go further along, and then February was when the invasion started, you see how the stocks just increase for these companies. So we have Raytheon's here, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and you have Thales. So look at where they are now, 60%. So you see, there's money in this for someone. There's just not money in it for us. So glad he pointed that out. So glad he pointed that out. So let me go back in. There's one more portion here where he taps into inflation. And he says here, but how does any of this benefit the vast majority of Americans? Does that even matter? As of 2020, almost 30 million Americans are without any health insurance. Over the weekend, USA Today warned of the ongoing infant formula shortage. Now, this is happening right now. I'm going to get into that in a bit as well. In which 40% of popular baby formula brands were sold out at retailers across the U.S. during the week starting April 24th. It's still happening. So many Americans are unable to afford college for their children that close to a majority are delaying plans or eliminating them altogether. Meanwhile, monthly poverty remained elevated in February 2022, with a 14.4% poverty rate for the total U.S. population. Overall, 6 million more individuals were in poverty in February relative to December. I'm going to say this one more time because this debunks something that mainstream media has been saying. Overall, 6 million more individuals in poverty in February relative to December. This debunks the narrative that mainstream media is saying about homelessness and the poverty issue in this country. And I've seen multiple of them say it. There's more jobs, more people are back to work. Poverty has declined in America. No, it hasn't. And I didn't even have to read this article to see that. I see it in person. I saw it when Rome and I did Tour for the Poor in Boston. The homeless population has increased. They have shifted to other areas because the city will push them out and they'll just go relocate somewhere else in the city. But the population has increased. So I'm glad that he pointed that out. So the message that is coming across from people like Joe Biden, Jen Psaki during these press conferences, they are not being honest with you. They are telling you lies. And I'm glad that more people are pointing this out. So let's go back in. The latest data from the U.S. Census Bureau found that approximately 42.5 million Americans are living below the poverty line. Americans with diabetes often struggle to buy life-saving insulin, and on and on and on. Let's talk about the poverty line. Now, this differs depending on which state you live in. If you live in a state like mine, Massachusetts, is actually pretty easy to be below the poverty line or to be just above the poverty line. Because if you're making $35,000 a year here in the Boston area, that's the poverty line, because the cost of living is so expensive here. It's so much higher here, right? Now, if you're making $35,000 a year and you lived in, let's say, South Carolina, you might be all right. But making that here, you would be just right at the poverty line. You have teachers here who are right at the poverty line. College educated teachers that sit right there at the poverty line. And this proves a point that I've been saying before. Just because you have higher education, that doesn't necessarily mean you have higher income. Not nowadays. One more point that I want to point out in this article as well. Boop-a-boop-a-boop. One would usually expect the American left, or whatever passes it for these days, to be indignant about the expenditure of tens of billions of dollars for weapons while ordinary Americans suffer. But the American left, such that it exists, is barely visible when it comes to debates over the war. While American liberals stand in virtual unity with the establishment wing of the Republican Party behind the Biden administration in support for the escalating U.S. role in this war. A few stray voices, such as Noam Chomsky, have joined large parts of the international left in urging a diplomatic solution in lieu of war and criticizing Biden for insufficient efforts to forge one. But the U.S. left and American liberals are almost entirely silent, if not supportive. And he's right. And I've seen it over and over again. The number of people who are cheering on war, it just brings back old memories. It reminds me of September 11 again. Do we even have a left in this country? I'm not talking about individual people. I mean, as a whole, a group, an organization. Do we really have that? Do we have a true left? I'm beginning to wonder. Because I've been seeing people who say they're leftists support and advocate for war. I'm not going to read the entire article, you guys. Definitely check this out. Eric, can you put the link to this in the chat? But again, guys, the name of this article, it's by Glenn Greenwald, and it's called Biden Wanted $33 billion More for Ukraine. Congress quickly raised it to $40 billion. Who benefits? Definitely check it out. I'm going to go to some of these comments, and then I have something else to show you in reference to the inflation issue and where the money is really going. So let me move that out of the way, and let's go to some of these comments. Lauren says, Joe got $33 billion for Ukraine, but I'm still missing the last $600 of my stimmy. I agree. Johnny, it's not for Ukraine. It's for U.S. weapons manufacturers. Yep. Septian, Glenn with the receipts. This is god awful. I agree. Golden Silence, Sabby, the pattern is the same. A ratchet effect in full effect. Turning only one way up and up. I hear you. And a kid, hi, Sabby. Please consider the Obama bank bailouts were originally $150 billion and they have turned out to be more like $1 trillion. That's right. That's right. Janet said part of that money will boomerang back into re-election coffers. Brothwaite says Raytheon and Lockheed Martin make the Javelin missile. The CEO says their production is tied up, making them for the next 12 months. That's scary. And that's concerning. Thank you for the super chat, Oz. Democrats must be burned to the ground in the next election cycle to send the message, we are mad as hell and we aren't going to take it anymore. GOP, beware. I agree. That's what I'm saying. If you guys vote for them again, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. Let's talk about this money. And I want to show you how something is not right. Now, this tweet is from Michael Tracy, and he went on to say, Marjorie Taylor Greene said last night, $40 billion for Ukraine, but there's no baby formula for American mothers and babies. Stop funding regime change and money laundering scams. Here's how Jamie Raskin responded on behalf of House Democrats, now 100% war-crazed party. Let's hear what he had to say, because I want to show you that this is all connected. What Glenn was just talking about how the money is being spent and who it's being given to, and the inflation issue that we have in this country right now, and the lack of support from the so-called left that we have in this country, the lack of voice that they have right now. Now, that was coming from Marjorie Taylor Greene. My question is, why isn't that message coming from the squad? Listen to this. This was his response.
Here's a formula for the destruction of democracy: repeating Putin's propaganda and disinformation and appeasing imperialist assaults on sovereign nations.
Okay, so that was his response to that. And the question that I have, and I want to put this in the background here because I do want you to see what he said, that it was Marjorie Taylor Greene who spoke out against the way that this money is being spent and we're not helping people here in the United States. Wasn't that what the squad was supposed to do? The squad was supposed to go in and be hostile and push back against these establishment talking points. They're letting people like Marjorie Taylor Greene be the fighter, and they're just sitting there going along with the Democrat establishment. That's what they were supposed to do. Are they speaking out against this? No, they're not. In fact, they voted for it. Mr. X said, although I'm not a fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she is correct. Right? So the people who are members of the squad, how the hell do you let Marjorie Taylor Greene, how do you let her out left you? Let's talk about the formula issue. So that question also came up with Jen Psaki. Let's hear her response. So the question was, just wondering if you guys are planning on taking any steps to help remedy the nationwide baby formula shortage. Let's hear what Jen Psaki had to say about this.
There is growing concern about a persistent supply issue with infant baby formula.
Yeah.
There's about a 40% shortage right now. Major retailers having to limit how much people can buy, especially acute in places like Texas and Tennessee, Missouri, Iowa. This is partly an FDA issue, but it could be a Biden administration issue. Just wondering if you guys are planning on taking any steps to help remedy that.
Well, let me first say, as you know, but the FDA issued a recall to ensure that they are meeting their obligation to protect the health of Americans, including babies, who, of course, were receiving or taking this formula, and ensure safe products are available. That's their job. Ensuring the availability of these products is also a priority for the FDA, and they're working around the clock to address any possible shortage. Okay, that is like hearing your voice on the answering machine, which I know that's a very outdated reference, but we've all been there. So what the FDA is doing, which while they are independent, they are part of the administration, is taking a number of steps to address. That includes working with major infant formula manufacturers to ensure they're increasing production, because part of this issue is, of course, making sure there's stock on the shelves, right? And working with the industry right now to optimize their supply lines, product sizes to increase capacity, and prioritizing product lines that are of greatest needs. Because obviously, as someone who my child has long been out of formula, fortunately, but it's close enough that I remember when you're trying to go to the store and get the specific kind of formula for your age child or whatever their needs are. So they are taking steps with that in mind. They're also exercising flexibility and expediting review of notifications of manufacturing changes that will help increase supply, particularly in the case of specialized formula. So that applies to that as well for medical needs. And they're also trying to streamline import entry review review processes for already notified infant formula products coming from notified foreign facilities. So what they're trying to do in the shorthands of it is increase supply by working with a range of manufacturers and what their capacity is to ensure that the kinds of formula that was recalled is where they're able to help ensure it's on the shelves.
What was the question again? The question was just wondering if you guys are planning on taking any steps to help remedy the nationwide baby formula shortage. Jen Psaki, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. So these are the problems that people are dealing with right now in this country. And every time we turn around, we see that the president is giving more money abroad instead of using that money to help people right here in the United States. Now we have a baby formula shortage. How did we even get in this spot? Money has been misused, it's been mismanaged. And people who are poor and working class, and this is why I always go back to the class issue, people who are poor and working class are going to be the ones that struggle and suffer the most. Because I want to be very clear about something. Even though we have a baby formula shortage, people who are wealthy, they always find ways to get those things. Just like when we didn't have enough of those N95 like masks like earlier on during the pandemic, you know who did have those masks? People who are wealthy. Wealthy people, even during an episode where we have shortages, whether it's food, whether it's something like baby formula, they will already have those things. They'll be able to get it, even if that means they have to get it from another country. They have to get it from another resource. They have the money to be able to get it some way, shape, or form. Now, about a month ago, there were people that came on here teaching you how to grow your own food. And I have to reiterate this again. We need to do this. We need to grow our own food. When it comes to baby formula, like infant baby formula, some people are coming back and they're saying, well, this is why women should breastfeed. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone can do that. So we have to help each other. We have to protect ourselves because you see what's happening already. Because I can pretty much guarantee you, when we continue to have food shortages in this country, you know who will be fed? All of the politicians in DC. They'll make sure they're going to have food for them, even if that means there's not enough for us. Thank you for the super chat, Brothwaite. American left is center right. Even Bernie is centrist politically compared to global politics. America has no left. That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Brothwaite. Leroy said Jen made the formula shortages about her. She did. She found a way. Thank you for the super chat at Kid. We need hashtag March on Capitol. 1 million folks or more on Capitol Hill with quantifiable demands. Medicare for all, living wage, debt forgiveness, end of unjust wars in 2022. Yes, there is a march happening this summer. It's the Poor People's Campaign is putting that on. I did talk about it before on the show and show the video, but some people weren't feeling it because it's still connected to electoral politics. But there is such an event that is happening. But I do think we need to have more than one, right? We need to have another one that's calling out some of these left demands that a kid just mentioned. So I do agree. Thank you for the super chat, Sean. There is always money for war. Neocon /Lib Alliance. I agree.